Hi, welcome back to Growing Up Catholic - His Loving Touch. Today's a sad day. We just heard of a death in my daughter's in-law family, and it was shocking and much too early. I once heard a woman on a TV show, and I won't mention the name, but she had just lost a baby. And the first words out of her mouth and heart were, "God giveth and God taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." That takes a lot of strength and faith. Just like, Aunt Nellie when she lost her youngest son. So, although it's a very sad day for everybody and everybody's in shock, but we know that she is with the Lord and at peace. And even though that's not very comforting at this time, because the loss is so deep, but eventually the loss gets less. I don't know if that's the right word, but grief is like waves that come in like very rapid and at the beginning. And as you mourn and grieve, and as time passes, the waves begin to slow down. You never forget that person. You never forget that love of knowing them and being with them. But life does go on, and even though the pain is deep, there's just no actually right way to grieve. And there's no wrong way to grieve. I always say just feel what you're feeling. And if you think you need help, then go to like a grief counselor. And they also have grief groups. Just something I needed to say. God bless this woman who died and the family. I pray that God's comforting peace embraces all of them as they walk this very shocking, tragic path, a new path without her. Okay, so now I'm going to start another story about my mom. Again, once she left Aunt Nellie's, like once she was home, the example of Aunt Nellie brought her to a deeper faith. And my mom was reading the Bible and going to church and just getting closer to God, getting more of a relationship with Him. So that started at age 17 when she returned home. And when her dad died at age 19, and the Depression, the Great Depression, that was felt around the world, she began to lose hope. And I'm sure her dad's death had a big part in that, but so did the Great Depression. There were no jobs, and Mom went out every day to look for work everywhere because she had to help support the family. Although she had 5 older brothers, The oldest brother had moved away, far away actually, and the others, some were working and bringing in what they could to help the family, and others couldn't find jobs. And my mom, being 19 now, she knew how important it was to help support the family. Now, clothes were hard to come by back then, so everybody mended everything. My mom had holes in her clothes, holes in her stockings, holes in her shoes, holes in her coat. And, you know, we live in the area, and she lived in the area, and we still live there, where winters were harsh. And they would go looking, for coal along the train tracks, and a lot of people did that to try and heat their homes. Not everybody had fireplaces, and that we know. Anyway, she just, they all went looking for coal and work. So Mom said she was so embarrassed of the way she looked. She would use the back alleys and streets that were not crowded, or, she just needed to not be seen. She just would go into the places, fill out applications for work, and leave. Now, most people had the same problem. Their shoes, their toes would stick out of their shoes. So anyways, it wasn't a new thing, but Mom was embarrassed by it. And every day Mom would walk by this church, the back of the church, and there was the door, and she had lost so much hope that Mom stopped going to church, stopped reading her Bible. She just felt hopeless, and her faith dwindled, and she just couldn't cope with all that had happened. But one day, after she had put in an application at this, pharmaceutical place where they made medications and pills, and Mom was walking back home, and behind the church again, and it was an alleyway. So Mom thought, she thought, well, I'm just going to go in the church, and I'm just going to talk to God. And she did. And I have written what she said, and because I can't be very accurate at quoting her words, I'm just going to read this part of it. She said, I was desperate, Elaine. Any hope I had was fading like my faith. I lost all hope in God, and prayer became an empty verbal repeat of the hour before. She said, please God, help me find a job. And again, my prayer hit a brick wall. And then she said, one day I passed the back door of the church I had passed so often. She said the door was slightly opened, and indeed, she knew she needed to sit down as her feet were killing her. She said, I peeked in and there was no one in the church, so I went in and sat in a pew close to the back. She said, sitting there, I took my shoes off and rubbed my cold, dirty feet. And she looked up at Jesus on the cross, wondering why he had left her. She said Aunt Nellie entered her thoughts. What would Aunt Nellie do? And would she curl up in a ball like Mom was doing after looking for work? And would Aunt Nellie give in to hopelessness? Or would she continue to trust God and in her Savior Jesus? She said, no matter what, in good times, and as we heard from the last story, Aunt Nellie would not falter. Her faith would stand in the face of her trials. And each trial grew Aunt Nellie's faith. Just going to put that there. She said, as she sat in the pew, she decided to be honest with God. She just said, I just wanted you to know that. She just needed to be honest with God, and, she just said to him, God, I'm paraphrasing. God, I feel hopeless. I feel you've forsaken me and my family. And the faith that was growing in me is being lost. I really need you, Lord, to help me find a job, to help me get through this. And as she knelt in the pew, she started to cry. She was just at a loss. She knew what Aunt Nellie taught her, but she just couldn't get through this time in her life. So as she cried, she felt a peace come over her, and she stopped crying. And she was looking at the altar, at the cross. And all of a sudden, she said she saw this kind of thing like a cloud above the cross. And it started traveling. And she said it kind of had a pink hue to it. And it came and kind of settled, like she said, like enveloping me, embracing me. She knew it was God. And though she never heard anything, except she felt his presence. And this pink fluffy cloud, her favorite color at that time was pink, just gave her hope and unconditional love. And like, God was saying to her, I understand. Just keep trusting in me. And so she left that church by the back door and started walking home, but with a new step to her feet. She felt lighter and more peaceful than she had felt in a long time. And then all of a sudden she heard somebody calling her name. Beatrice, Beatrice. And she said, "Oh my gosh, is that God calling me?" So she looked behind her from where the voice was coming, and it was her brother Wilfred. Everybody called him Wilf. And he was running up to her, and she thought, oh no, more bad news. But actually, my Uncle Wilfred said to Mom, "Beatrice, I've been looking all over for you." He said, "That pharmaceutical place, they called. They want you there for an interview now." And Mom said, "Now?" And she just looked at her clothes and she said, "I can't go now. Look at me." He says, "You have to go now. They're waiting for you." So she did and was offered the job. She knew that was God in her life, that pink fluffy cloud of freedom, and answers brought about this job. And she didn't have to worry about clothes because they had uniforms, and they gave her everything she needed, even shoes. And it wasn't long, maybe 2 days later, that my Uncle Wilfred found a job too. So things were really improving for that family. And Mom flourished in that job, and she was able to help her family financially, get proper clothes, food, even at times coal. I think we have to remember that during that Great Depression, things were hard to come by. And because everybody was in the same boat, like there was little to get, little to have. But they managed. And the Great Depression ended in 1939 when the World War II started. So that's the story of Mom's miracle for a job and my Uncle Wilfred. But most of all, it's the story of redemption, the story of growth, the story of knowing Aunt Nellie's example lifted her, gave her the hope. So when she did get the job, and the first thing she did was call my Aunt Nellie. And Aunt Nellie was just so happy. And she said, "Beatrice, never lose hope in God. He will always see you through. He might say no, he might say yes, but trust him, because his no's are for lifting you. He has a greater plan for you when he says no." And so Mom lived that advice. So that's the story of Mom's getting a job, and most of all, that presence of God in that pink, slightly pink, fluffy cloud that enveloped her. A miracle? Oh yeah. And a healing? Yes. Because God brought Mom back. And she knew that. So thank you for watching. I'm trying to keep these shorter. God bless you. Please subscribe and like, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to say, God bless you. and goodbye.